You want me to sing now? No, it's okay. Because in Brazil, a couple of months ago, I was in Brazil. I told Noah about that. I had an exhibition, a lecture. I will show it. But before that, something about, I come from Tel Aviv. Did you know that? I came from Tel Aviv. And before, this is the street where I live, in the center of Tel Aviv. Look at the flowers. Just a day before I came here. So nothing is zufall. So can you turn off a little bit the light? Better, yeah, thank you. The squeaking floor. This is my poster for my presentation in Brazil a couple of months ago. And I used again the sabra, the symbol of an Israeli that was born in the land. And it refers to also Israelis and also Palestinians, which is a problem that I'm not sure we will have time to talk. So anyhow, I'm here in front of 5,000 people in Brazil. Not 50, but 5,000, which is like a rock and roll show. It's fantastic. And then I went to it's frightening to go to the stage in front of 5,000 people. It's like a monster, but it gives you a lot of energy. And I had this sudden need to sing. I really sang in Portuguese. This is why I was talking about singing. I'm a bad singer, but in the 80s when I was in the art school, I used to listen to Brazilian music that was very much in fashion. And I was young, I got the words by heart. So I could sing Brazilian songs. So this was an amazing opportunity for me once in my life to sing a song in front of 5,000 people. And they all stood up and started to... So, I mean, I got to my top moment, just the first minute of the lecture. Then it all went down. So, like I told you, like Noah told you about the sabra. You know this? Probably you know. The sabra was brought 400 years ago by we have a Spanish guy here in the crowd. The sabra was brought from Mexico with the Spaniards 400 years ago to the Mediterranean. And it was brought to mark borders between fields, yes, of peasants. And it's very ironic that I live in a country that has no borders, no definite borders, and our national symbol is a sabra cactus, which defines borders. It's an irony, just a thought. So, as a matter of fact, this is the flag of Mexico. This is where it comes from. And I use it. It's like my alphabet, as an icon that I use, like ABC. I take the sabra as a symbol for bringing ideas and expressions. So for my lecture and exhibition in Mexico City in 2008, I brought back the sabra to where it came from. With my heart. I mean, I send my love back to Mexico, and this is my homage, my thanks to the Mexican people. 400 years too late. I used it also 2 years ago in the Künstler House in Vienna as my theme. It was selected for the theme of the exhibition in Vienna, in the streets. It was very nice to see it. So I come, it's not my first time in Austria. This is a poster that shows, to those who know, the map of Israel. This is the map of Israel. I don't know if some of you were in Israel, but on the top it's Haifa. This is Tel Aviv, where I live. This is the Lake of Galilee, that probably you know. This is Jerusalem. It's a metaphor of the country. I use this sabra symbol in order to express the anxiety, the aggression, the danger that is built in our country for the last 100 years. So I use it as a symbol for the new year, greeting posters that I do every year. My exhibition in New Orleans. I deal with very, very heavy subjects sometimes. I try to combine some humor in it and to tell a story that will not, you will not break in tears, but also with a little bit of humor inside, because we live in a very difficult neighborhood. In Greece, in Hamburg, and an exhibition that took place started in North Carolina 20 years ago and went all through the United States, the story of the Israeli-Palestinian relationship, both sides of peace, or you can say both sides of war. Depends when are you, which state. So the sabras are approaching each other and almost touching. It will hurt, but they send messages of colors of the Israeli and the Palestinian flags together, combined, in order to refer to a sort of relationship. This is the sabra fruit. The sabra fruit is very, very thorny in the outside. It hurts you when you touch it. Very tough in the outside, but very sweet in the inside. It's like the Israeli. It's a cliche of the Israelis. Like you have cliches of moo on the mountains, or Edelweiss, or sounds of music. We have our own cliches that I use. So the Israelis are tough in the outside, but sweet in the inside, and mellow. And the minute you pass through this yalla, yalla, yalla aggression, you find a mellow and warm people. But I use this sabra as a metaphor for an exhibition in Stockholm, Anatomy of a Conflict. This exhibition dealt with the relationship between Israelis and Palestinians and the whole region. It was in Stockholm in 2009. And as you can see, I took the fruit and I make like a surgery, like a open heart surgery. And I thought maybe a couple of months about how do I make a photo like this? How do I imitate a surgery room with a small fruit like that? And then I had a great idea. I went to see my dentist. And this is a sabra fruit. And I used all the tools of a dentist, which are like operational tools, and especially the light of the operation room, which is a special, very strong, focused neons and other lights, very defined light. I remember my dentist was the happiest ever doing something, not to drill in people's mouths. He was fascinated. And this is in the streets of Stockholm, the gallery, and the contents are posters that are dealing with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in the last 20 years. One of the cliches of Israel and Judaism is the Star of David, that of course I cannot avoid using it. I had to do, like 20 years ago, I was invited to a special exhibition. The theme was the Star of David in Jerusalem. And I made a special project about who is a Jew, which is a very, very hard question in Israel till today, because a Jew is only somebody that at least his mother is Jewish. If only his father is Jewish, he's not Jewish. Okay, it's very complicated, and a lot of people had problems when they wanted to come to Israel, to immigrate to Israel. They cannot get citizenship. And the process of becoming a Jew, because of the stubborn establishment, is sometimes hell. And I was very much against it because the process is the bureaucracy and even humiliation sometimes is unfair. So anyhow, I had to protest against this establishment by a very provocative mean, and I took the Star of David and made this poster. By all means, it's under the belt. Under the belt, I attacked the Jewish establishment, saying basically, fuck you. Of course, it was censored for the exhibition in Jerusalem, in the Holy City, and it made my name all over the world because of that. There was an article in Der Spiegel, for example, and all other in Moscow, in Berlin, in Hamburg. So 20 years later, a couple of months ago, I also had a request to participate in a poet made, there was an homage to an Israeli poet, and I picked a song, a poem. It's not a song, it's a poem. And I will try to translate it from Hebrew. It's very short. Your body is like a sachet of candies. On your smooth belly, I'm like a chocolate soldier. This is the whole song. It's like a haiku. And I took it very direct. And it's also it's talking about a song, of course, but also talking about us men that are going to the army in order to protect the shame of the mother nation. Because in Hebrew, mother and nation are the same, almost the same root. So the men, the chocolate soldiers, are sent to defend the shame of Mother Israel. And also sometimes it's I have to say that sometimes I disagree with the policy of my government, and this is a way to provoke it. But this time, it was shown in the gallery. No, it was provocative and so on, but not censored. So less publicity. But at least I was shown. The symbol of the State of Israel, the national symbol, not the icon like the sabra cactus, is the candelabra, the menorah. I don't know if you know this. This, according to the belief, was the candelabra in the temple, the holy temple in Jerusalem, 2,000 years ago, and it was taken by the Romans to Roma. And there's Titus Gate, you know, Titus Ark, you know that? Titus was the Caesar, and he made an ark, and this menorah is carved on stone, and this is a reminder of the holy candelabra that was used in the holy temple in Jerusalem 2,000 years ago, before the temple was destroyed by the Romans. So then, almost 2,000 years later, this became the national symbol, like your Adler. It's our Adler. So, of course, it's an obligatory to try to pinch it, to fight against it. So a couple of years ago, in 2007, Israel was maybe very much, all the establishment was like the days of Berlusconi. A lot of corruption, sex scandals in Israel. Amazing period. So it was it was obvious that I have to do something. And this is what I did for the Independence Day. So you see the candelabra here, made out of rotten bananas. So this is like Independence Day in the Banana Republic. And especially our president is still in jail because of sex affairs. It's funny, but terrible. And also the prime minister, income tax, police, everything is over. It's gone after the elections. But it was a strange and funny period. And I showed it. Nobody wanted to show it, but I could show it in the streets of Tel Aviv. I got a lot of telephone calls and how dare you and stuff like this, but it was okay. Okay, this is our independence war, 1948, independence of Israel. It's our icon. It's our Iwo Jima, if you know, like the Americans against the Japanese. This is our icon. I'm sure in Austria you also have iconic photos. Tirol, something. So this is the conquest of the city of Eilat in southern Israel in 1948, Independence War. And it's a symbol for the new Israel ideologies, good future, and all the nice ideas. But what happened 50 years later, when I made it for the 50th anniversary of Israel, this is what happened to us. And not only to us. I mean, downtown here, also you have unbearable McDonald's. So it's a food for thought. But anyhow, I made this poster almost 18 years ago, and still it has a demand. For example, in a book about communication last year. So it's an icon, two icons that meet together and create a new meaning. So this is a shalom, peace. 20 years ago, again, another work. And look at the colors of the Israeli and Palestinian flags that are trying to hold back the war. But like Gulliver, it's always too strong. I mean, it's like a scorpion that has to bite. This is the size, usually, of the works. And I realized the size do matter if you thought differently. I use in my work a lot of aggressive icons because of my background, my surrounding, wars, army, reserves, wars, army, reserves, and stuff. It's a repetitive ritual. It's a ritual. So I took this hand grenade. It's an iconic structure. They don't make hand grenades like this anymore. But all you know, it's a hand grenade. It's from the World War II. But still, like a house is like this, or heart is like this, so hand grenade is like this. So I used my keyboard. I bought an old keyboard and made it. It's not Photoshop. I made a statue, a real statue, and then because sometimes with 3D or Photoshop you lose the authenticity of things, and I felt it's much stronger like this. And another version of aggression is like the name of my lecture, Explosive Ideas. It's for an exhibition in Istanbul a couple of years ago. And I used it again. Recently with Charlie Hebdo. So I made it in 2006, and 9 years later, it's so relevant. Yes? Just incredible what happened there in Paris, because we do have power. We do have power. If we know how to use it, all of us, I think as designers, you can influence, you can bring your ideas to its endless results. So here in another exhibition in Tenerife, I was lucky to be in a tourist attraction in Tenerife. It's on the coast of Africa. It's a Spanish colony. And I use this bazooka as the poster as a bazooka. And with my experience, I really had the chance to use a real bazooka in real life in a war. So I know the effect of this in real life. But symbolically, you can also do your contribution by design. Another exhibition in Istanbul, I call it father tongue. Like mother tongue, my father tongue. Like Muttersprache, das ist Vatersprache. This is my father tongue. I was born with, I had no choice. I had to go to the army. It's obligatory. My son is going now to the army, and in a way, I take out my tongue again as a protest against my destiny. That's about violence. We will come back to this very soon. 2 years ago, I was asked to participate in an exhibition in Texas about immigration. This is my first almost ready-made poster. I had this, I got by mail this request to participate in an exhibition. I had an idea after a couple of days, and I took a paper, cut it, fold it, took my very old cellular, took a photo and enlarged it, and that's it. This was no studio, no lights, no dentist, nothing, just very direct, and I sent it, and the rest is history. It was shown in America in a lot of places. So last year, I had the opportunity. This is the main square in Tel Aviv, Rabin Square. I don't know if you noticed, but there are 10,000 black people here. Why they are here? Because they want rights. These are refugees from Eritrea and Darfur. They went all the way, they are coming to Europe sometimes, but it's easier through Egypt to come to Israel. So there were about, at the beginning, 100,000 refugees. Now there are 50,000. And their status, because remember who is a Jew? They are not, for sure. Their status is not clear, and therefore they cannot work. They don't have permits, they don't have rights, and it's impossible to be like this for a long period. So they made a protest, and I thought it's very important to raise this subject to the public and to try to get at least temporary permits to work. So I approached the High Commissioner for Refugees of the UN and offered to make a campaign, a political, social campaign. So here is where I combine my careers. For a living, I cannot live from art and support my 4 kids. I have 4 children at home. So art is maybe a suggestion. It's a way of expressing yourself, but you have to make a living. So I have an advertising agency. This is for next time, my next lecture. I will talk about MAN, the truck company, or Remax, the real estate company, or Dodge, the car company, and other clients. But sometimes I can combine my abilities, my knowledge, my connections, and to help in social, political activities. So I took this chance, and next month we are going to launch a campaign for civil rights or basic rights for refugees from Africa. So the first step was to meet in person the refugees and to document them, to talk about their feelings, what they are willing. They came not because they wanted to come to the Holy Land and to make money. They came because they were threatened, they were killed, they were raped, they were burned, and they had to run away to the nearest safe place. Not because they were looking for jobs. So we started to interview the refugees and to document their stories, and now So next month we are going to YouTube with testimonies, Facebook and other medias, and a series of posters and ads in the magazines. And the title is Recognize. In Hebrew, it means angenem. Angenem and recognize is in Hebrew the same word. It's a double meaning. Recognize me and recognize my rights. It's the same word. One word which describes. I'm Ismail Baraka from Darfur. Recognize the facts that refugees are not enemies. They are human beings that had to escape from their countries. Recognize reality. Now there are 57,000 refugees living among us, and some of them are in camps in Israel. Recognize me, recognize my rights to make basic living. This is basically the campaign. And it was for me a very personal experience to meet the people, to be with them for a couple of days and to hear their terrible stories like atrocities and their will to be normal. So for example, Saba Baraka, she has a bachelor degree in mathematics, but here she has nothing. I mean, in Tel Aviv, she has no right even to make a living, basic living. Or this was this guy Kabrum. He's a reporter from Addis Ababa, from Mogadishu. And Yusuf is in jail in Israel because he didn't do anything wrong, just the fact that he escaped from death, certain death. Now he has to be in a refugee camp like a prison. And so on and so on. Okay, a little bit about Israel. Just now, I will show you a map. This is Israel. Just yesterday, I checked out Israel. You know, the size of Israel is 4 times in Austria. So, I mean, 4 Israel is 1 Austria. So, Austria is very small, but Israel is 4 times smaller. But we have almost 8 million people like you. So, in this huge Middle East, look at the size of the giants, of the dragons: Iran, Iraq, Turkey, Syria, Saudi Arabia, Egypt. We are in the corner, but very important historical corner, because it was the main road between south and north, and east and west. So take a closer look. This is Israel in a closer look. I live here in Tel Aviv. It's in the center. This is a West Bank that you all know, of course, and this is Gaza. For the moment, no borders, a lot of mess. So in the summer, last summer, we had a war with the Palestinians in Gaza. So the Palestinians started to launch missiles on Israel until Tel Aviv. So just imagine the surrealistic scene in the middle of the summer, in the summer holiday, August, when the kids are at home. There are sirens. And we are all running to the shelters. So before that. So this is Tel Aviv. You see very modern city on one hand, and very cool with a beach. It's fantastic city. It's a very energetic, young, lively, amazing scene of art, music, theater, cinema. I already recommended you to come when it's peaceful. But on August, this is a scene in the shelter. In our house, we have 8 families in the house in the center of Tel Aviv, so we are all gathering. This is my son, my wife, the neighbors. We are all hiding from the missiles. Luckily, the Israeli technology solved most of the problem by sending anti-missiles against the Palestinian missiles. But in open areas where there was no defense, some missiles fell. So here, just imagine, this is the way to Jerusalem. 60 kilometers from Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, the capital. So I'm going to Jerusalem, and here, when you hear the alarm, stop safely in the side of the road. So in the middle of the way, you can hear a siren, and you have to stop and get out of the car and go down, because missiles start to attack you, which is here, especially when I look at the mountains here, it seems like crazy. So anyhow, there was a decision to stop the missiles by entering Gaza. So this is the map of Gaza. This is a sketch I made one night before we enter Gaza. And this is like, you see, a big hole, big pit. I was against it. I was against going with infantry to Gaza because it's always bad. But most of the government decided to enter. So it was a couple of days later, I discovered that all Gaza was covered with tunnels, yes, underground tunnels that were meant to send attack to Israel. So they discovered those tunnels. You see, it's underground Gaza. And I thought how terrible it is that instead of the Palestinians, instead of trying, not that I only blame the Palestinians, I blame the Israelis. There are both sides. But the Palestinians, instead of building tunnels to attack Israel, maybe the best way was to do something like this. It's ironic. Of course it's ironic. Of course it's not the subway in New York. But I launched this work, this poster, on the internet, and it was viral. It became viral. And I got from someone work from a colleague that I don't know on the other side. A Palestinian, it's in Arabic. A Palestinian did the same project, but very, very accurate, not like me as an idea. He took it seriously. He made lines, numbers of lines, like a metro of Gaza. For him, it was a fictional dream. For me, it was irony. But it's funny how people sometimes think about the same ideas. Meanwhile, on the border, on the north border, our north border, there is a big, big casino, like in Italian, casino, you know, a mess. So 3 years ago, it started 4 years ago, a terrible, terrible war, civil war against Assad in Syria. So 3 years ago, I made this protest, serial killer, like in, it's a deliberate mistake, serial killer. And I meant to attack the Assad regime, the president of Syria that is killing his own people. But I didn't have in mind that a year later, this was reality in this area with ISIS. It was a prophecy that too bad to be true, but it started to be more and more like bloody, and it's still going on, and it's just it's our neighbors. So we live in a not so sympathetic, unsympathisch neighborhood. Nachbarhood, Nachbarschaft. So going back to the Palestinians, to the Hamas, it's something I did also 10 years ago, a project about the Hamas values, which are very strange to my attitude, my democratic, liberal attitude. So also it's very bitter and ironic. So talking about values, so I think the photo says it all. You know, suicide bombers, a series of works. Everybody can commit suicide, a man, a woman, old, young. It's all very sarcastic. And according to the Hamas or the extreme Islam, you go to heaven to meet 70 virgins as a prize. I wonder what the virgins think about this. Or artistic values, or folklore values. Hard to deal with this. You're lucky. Okay, I'm jumping to another area which is in your neighborhood, and I'm talking about Sarajevo. It's your neighborhood. It's also hard to believe that 20 years ago in this area, close to you, there was a genocide, a massacre between the Serbs, the Bosnians, the Herzegovina, Croatia. But anyhow, last year was the celebration for the 100 years of the beginning of World War I, the murder of Franz Ferdinand, as you all know, and the death of your empire. But anyhow, I was requested for the 100 years of Sarajevo project to make a poster. 20 years ago, I made a poster against the UN in former Yugoslavia. And it's still relevant today, you know. The UN, the unable, unbearable, unreliable, it's still today, till today, doesn't have the power to prevent what happened 20 years ago, and now in our neighborhood. But going back to Sarajevo, this is Sarajevo. Sarajevo is famous for the river and the bridges that are connecting the two sides of town, like here. But they have traditional bridges. So I thought for the 100 years to make something positive, as far as I can do, something positive. So I thought about the bridge. A bridge is a symbol for connecting people. So Bridge of Peace was my work. And two sides are approaching each other, bridge to peace, on a feather of a dove of peace. But it's also very fragile. It can fly away. But for the moment, it's the maximum we can expect. I wish in our region we could have the sort of peace like in Bosnia-Herzegovina. Another project that I took part was in Greece. It's in a town that, like in this area of time, this town was a meeting point of Jews, Christians, and Muslims. And they made an exhibition about religions. So I took René Magritte, that is one of my influences, and made, instead of Masterpiece of the Horizon, the name of his work, I made Masterpiece, like peace, not a Stück, peace, Frieden. And took the Temple Mount, where the Holy Temple was 2,000 years ago, as a symbol. So for the three religions, Christianity is a little bit out, but here in this case, but Judaism and Islam together in a maybe surrealistic environment, which is true. We live in a surrealistic environment. At least we have a half-normal relationship with Turkey. With Turkey, I have a long history of, I love Turkey. I go there every time I can. I recommend you. But Turkey is also problematic. There is politically, I don't have to tell you, it's not like the best democracy example. So I was surprised that last year I was asked to come for a project of posters that celebrating Feast of Democracy. And it's very ironic because, for example, YouTube is censored in Turkey. Twitter is censored in Turkey. So it's crazy. You invite me to talk about democracy and you censor the web, which is a little bit problematic in my opinion. But anyhow, because I love Turkey, I went to this project. And this is a sketch I made for a work. And I don't know if you know the flag of Turkey. It's this crescent and a star. So I made this funny sort of... and of course, right away, the head of the program had one gesture. He made like this. So, of course, it was censored because he was afraid for his head. I mean, literally. So I tried another version. This also didn't work out. Eventually, we compromised on this version, which is okay, but and another version. And then there was an exhibition in seven cities in Turkey with a soft version of my idea, but because I love Turkey, I didn't make any scandal. I jumped to another very serious issue, in my opinion, the environment. Because I believe that, like the Israeli Palestinians, it's 70 years ago here was hell. Even in Innsbruck, hell. And everything is okay. But the environment will suffer more and more in the future, and we have to think about it. So this is an exhibition another exhibition in Stockholm that dealt with the environment. I will show you some works about the environment. So I use again my pencils as tools of expression and refer to nuclear problem. So I'm talking about, it's already 9 years ago, about the problem of recycling, nuclear, missiles. It refers to everything, especially with humor. This Ayatollah. It's relevant. In 2006, now it's so relevant. Just think about it. I don't know what will happen. I have no idea. I have on Facebook 1,000 friends from Tehran. I have great, dear, close friends, Iranian friends, but the governments are crazy. So anyhow, we'll go back to that soon, if we have time. I started the protest against the nuclear like exactly 20 years ago. I launched a campaign of posters that were sent to the embassy of Japan, to the embassy of France, that ironically, in August 6, 1995, made nuclear experiments in Mururoa Islands in the Pacific, the last experiments ever, but I had to protest against it. I'm not going to sing, but if you remember Tina Turner's "We Don't Need Another Hero." So we don't need another hero. This was the first campaign. 10 years later, I launched another campaign in memory of Hiroshima that were in the streets. And now the 70th anniversary now, very soon. Food for thought. Going back to nuclear, Chernobyl in Ukraine, I guess you all know about this terrible catastrophe that happened 20-something years ago. So for the anniversary of 20 years for Chernobyl, I launched a campaign together with Greenpeace in the Mediterranean. It was a campaign from Malta, Egypt, Lebanon, Israel, Turkey. And it was an exhibition of works documenting what happened to Chernobyl, a dead city, a ghost city. And 20 years for Chernobyl, and the subtext was in Hebrew, Chernobyl is here, and it referred to the fact that Israel has nuclear plants as well. I don't know about Austria. Do you have nuclear plants? You don't. Good. 2 points. 12 points. Because Germany has 20 nuclear plants. We'll talk about that in a minute. So this is a documentation 20 years later of people in Chernobyl. So for example, this is a 16-year-old girl. And it's horrible, 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 horrible. So it was a nightmare. And then in 2011, 4 years ago, in 11th of March, again, there was a terrible thing happened in Fukushima, the worst nightmare. So I remember years ago I saw the movie Hiroshima Mon Amour by Alain Resnais that made a mark in my head. And this is what I wanted to express, my love to the poor people of Fukushima. Fukushima, my love, and to refer to the atom bomb and to talk about the water of the tsunami and the flag of Japan that is sinking in this water and making sort of a jellyfish or an atom bomb again. And it was, I remember exactly when I heard it, it was Friday at 1 o'clock. So usually at Friday, after a hectic week, I'm going to sleep at 1. I heard on the news, and I went to sleep, and I woke up at 2 with a nightmare, with this vision. I had this vision. And I right away went to the computer, and maybe half an hour later, I launched it. And it was a campaign in the street, and then it was a campaign in the streets in Germany. And in Germany, this period, as you can see, it was the election campaign. Part of the election campaign just by Zufall. And the Green Party in southern Germany for the first time won the elections. And it's historical. And Merkel decided to close the nuclear plants till 2020, which is unbelievable. So something maybe is moving. So it was all over the world, even in Turkey. And they even referred to the old poster. So a couple of months later, I made an homage I created a poster exhibition in Tel Aviv, homage and contribution to the people of Japan after Fukushima. So with thanks to my daughter that was holding the flag of Japan, I made this poster, and this is in the opening. The manga people came, and it was friendly. So I travel a lot. I go to lectures and workshops all over the world. And so 2 years ago in my tour in America, again in Boston, I talk about weapons of mass destruction. I talk about political and everywhere social, environmental issues. This was 2 years ago in March, more than 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. There were elections. Maybe you remember that Obama was selected for the second period. But this is the Republicans against the Democrats, or the races, all talks about those issues in America. One of the issues is consuming. And this is campaign against consuming, you know. So I remember, also very funny sometimes, how things work. I created buttons for people, and it was sold like hysterically. So it's consuming again. And especially I remember this was the biggest hit in Sweden. Maybe in Austria this will work. So in the streets. So talking about consuming also the environment, we don't have a lot of time. And in this neighborhood, your neighborhood, this is the pollution a couple of years ago of the Danube. Terrible pollution in Hungary. So the water, it's not Photoshop. The water came up to here. Terrible. Terrible poison in the water, in the sea. So I created this, the Blue Danube Requiem, that you all know. And it was also a project in Italy, in the streets. Another terrible environmental atrocity is the Gulf of Mexico 5 years ago, Black April, exactly 5 years ago. This catastrophe will last for hundreds of years. It's affecting Mexico, Gulf of Mexico, and the southern part of Louisiana and Alabama. And it's because of BP, British Petroleum, as maybe you remember. It was also in the streets in Germany. To those who know about Bad Hair Day, so this is Bad Hair Day, I found this, how do you say, blat, this blat, whatever, no, you call it blat, in front of the house where I live, and just reminded me lungs. But sometimes I was asked to make something positive for a magazine in Milan. I can do also positive things, like this one. It's one of the designers in my studio. She has very nice lips. I guess she's a good kisser. I created also the branding for this is another story, but not now, for the Ministry of the Environment in Israel 15 years ago. It's still going on. The slogan, I created the slogan. Do you all know the word shalom? In Hebrew means peace. So shalom im hasviva means peace with the environment. And it refers not only for the environment, but also refers for our neighbors. So the minute the right-wing party came to power in Israel, they erased the slogan, just symbolically. I mentioned Twitter earlier. This is I have nothing to do with Twitter, but the fact that in 2009, this was the logo of Twitter. They are not, they are changing all the time. They are not like Coca-Cola at 150 years. They change. So why do I tell you this? Because in 2009, my friends in Tehran contacted me and said, help us, do something, do a poster, do an idea. So I took this Twitter and I turned it to green, like the color of the attempt to make a revolution. If you remember, 6 years ago in Tehran, the green movement, the liberals chose the color green for their attempt to make a revolution. So this is what I did. Again, voices of freedom, the call for help through the green Twitter. And I went to Milan to meet my Iranian friends for demonstrations against the regime. And I also again sent my green heart for Tehran. And as I mentioned, I have many friends, Iranian friends, good friends. One of them is a fantastic designer, Mehdi Saidi from Tehran. And we meet in Turkey. This is where we can meet and not get caught and talk about design and not wars. Another, I have to check out the time. 2 hours, 3 hours? My flight, I have to go at 5 o'clock in the morning. I think we will continue next time some of the... I jump to another issue. This is my son, now he's 12, Daniel. I took him as a model for a project about education. I was asked to take part in a project, international project about education. And this is what I did. Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. This is what Nelson Mandela said. And this is like, if you have education, you can reach your goals, you can get your prey, you can catch the meat if you have an education. Again, another social project. This is the Alpha Boys School in Jamaica, in Kingston, Jamaica. This is the biggest school for reggae. And 4 years ago, a group of designers decided to make an international poster competition, reggae poster competition, and they asked me to be in their jury, and they asked me if I can contribute for a public auction work. So I right away said yes, and I thought about an idea, and I made a sketch. And I was looking for somebody. I had a friend that had a band, Ruben. He's from Ethiopia, but he has a reggae band. I asked Ruben to help me. And I took him to my studio, and then I made the poster. This is Ruben's hair, and I'm Alpha Boy School Jamaica, and I played with the word Kingston, King's Tone. Because they're always in reggae, if you like it, I love reggae, about kings, King of Jerusalem, King of Zion. We have the Star of David, we have a lot in common. So in Washington, there was a public auction, and as you can see, it was sold. Sold out. And now to a completely another story. International AIDS Day, 22 years ago. But it's relevant, it's fresh like now. From this poster, I made I made a fortune. How? I contributed this to the AIDS fund in Israel, but there were so many copies of this, people that copycats, people that copied this campaign in Spain, for example, or in Lita, or other places, and I sued them, and I got a lot of money out of from newspaper, magazine, just a funny idea. Another tour in America 5 years ago, again in April. So here I came to El Paso. El Paso is on the border of Texas. On the other side is, one side is America. El Paso is the third best city in America in terms of high standards of living. It's like Innsbruck, but big time. And on the other side, the Ciudad Juarez, which is the worst place on earth, maybe. It's hell. Because of gang wars, at least 2,000 people are dying every year. And while I was there was a gang attack with helicopters. Amazing. I felt at home right away. But they also have a wall, like we have between Israel and Palestine, there is a wall. So I talked about that. I'm against walls. And I went to Minneapolis and to Seattle and talk about political, social issues. So maybe this is the best description of our situation in Israel. Peace between wars. This is how we grew up. Peace between wars. So it's always like this clash, but we are hopefully on top of that. I was lucky to get accepted to work with Amnesty International 20 years ago for 7 years. And I launched a campaign that some of it became international. And this was the branding of the Israeli section. And we dealt with true issues like civil rights and human rights in China and in Nigeria and in the United States. All kinds of issues. The third world, dying third world, and the self-saturated West. So you have a dead body there and a cigar that costs $100, Cohiba. So I have to jump to... So as I mentioned, Turkey before, so more than 30 years ago, I went for a couple of months to Turkey. I was fascinated by a movie called Midnight Express, you know? Did you hear about that? It's creepy movie. Somebody that is trying to smuggle drugs and get arrested and ending up in a Turkish jail. Not because of that, I didn't want to go to jail, but somehow I was fascinated by this, by the views, I don't know, something was attractive, and Turkey is near. So 30-something years, 34 years ago, 33 years ago, I discovered Turkey. And Turkey, more than 30 years ago, was not like Turkey today. It made a giant leap, giant jump in terms of technology, advanced culture, design. Amazing scene now in Turkey. It's the awakening of the giant, the old giant of the empire. They have a potential. There are 70 million. So those days, there were bears in Istanbul. In Istanbul. And I went to the villages, to East Turkey, and I was inspired. Look at the lamps that are hanging there. I was inspired by a culture that disappeared, a kitsch culture, unbelievable kitsch. And this is me more than 30 years ago on the border of Iran, near the border of Iran. And I just fell in love with Turkey. And ironically, a year later, I found myself, I'm sure you will not imagine what is here in the picture. This is Beirut. So Lebanon, Beirut. And I'm a soldier in the Israeli army. I was in the third year of the art school. I was drafted for the reserves and went to a real war where I lost a lot of friends. A real war for a long period. And it affected me for years, these events. So I had a chance a couple of years later to design a poster for a movie talking about against the war in Lebanon, like 32 years ago, 33 years ago. And it's a story about a unit of soldiers that all eventually die. It's a very, very cynic, ironic against this war. Okay, this is a military cemetery in Jerusalem, and here lies one of my best childhood friends, Guni Harnik. And it was done 15 years ago when it was 18 years for the Lebanon war. And in Hebrew, 18 has another meaning. It's to be alive. Because in Hebrew, the combination of letters can be a combination of numbers. And it's like the Kabbalah. I don't know if you know this. It's in Hebrew. It's different from Latin. Every letter is also a number. So 18 mean to be alive. So 18 years for the Lebanon war, alive for the Lebanon war, and this is all my friends. It's very sad, but this is my background. They are forever 25. And this is a campaign in the streets to mention the new year, have a year of peace and equality. It's a positive campaign, or like this campaign of coexistence. But this is bullshit. Reality is like this. Not bullshit, but nice to have. So here we are, two nations that are West Bank, Israel. We are doomed to be together. We cannot separate and open flesh, and it's painful. Like the two sabras, the cactus are, earlier I showed you, they are approaching, but now they are touching and hurting, and it's very painful. It's like the same body that is eating, chewing itself. It's every year, so a series of every year, consecutive. And this is for the new year, again, 2002. Of course, very not possible that suicide bombers and an elite Israeli soldier will hug and be together. It also was scandalous. It was all in Europe, articles in Die Welt, I remember, in Germany. And an exhibition I had in Denver, in Colorado. So basically it's all us Israelis between the two sides. And another homage to Magritte, the kiss. This is the traditional Jewish cloth you put when you pray, and the kofia, the Palestinian, and it's impossible. The kiss, the connection is no connection, no communication. So when my son was born, my fourth son was born. He was born with a missile. It's also very ironic and sad that we have to deal with this reality. And this is the new Israeli future fighter F-16I that I suggested for the government and for the Air Force that it should be under the glass with lethal other friends, not shooting at civilians, but it was a suggestion, my suggestion. It was an anti-war campaign, but things sometimes are strange. Somebody in the Israeli Air Force liked this work and took it for a calendar for the Air Force. So sometimes funny. But basically, I mentioned the word ritual. The ritual of killing of two sides is going for more than 60 years, and it's a ritual of suicide. Like this, Israel is like a bloodbath of, not anymore, but in 2002 it was crazy. Suicide bombers, attacks on the Palestinians, on the Israelis, on the Palestinians, like the recycling. So I made this bloodbath, and this is how I felt. I felt amazing anxiety. And a year later, still, and it's relevant. It's all the time. No peace, just blah, 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 talks, no peace. And it's getting worse and worse. In 2004, it's my hand, Photoshop, of course. And then the wall between Israel and Palestine, I made a joke about it, United Colors of Beton. It was an ironic series of beton of the wall that leads nowhere. Because walls are meant to fall, as you know. And this is, we talk about peace, but go to war. We go to war, we come back on wheelchairs. Dove of peace is peace of dove. So again, in 2006, 9 years ago, again another round of aggression, another war in Lebanon. And this time it was painful. I was already out of the army, but we saw the white in the eyes of the enemy, and they saw our white in the eyes, but eye for an eye, we both lost eyes. It's an anti-war campaign. So peace and war is something I deal a lot, and symbolically, this is peace and war. And the negative is war and peace, and this is peace and war. So the story here is I couldn't find a soldier like this. There are no soldiers like this. As you know, they're all like this, or like this, or jumping, or shooting. So it's not a Photoshop. I took some soldiers and created a new soldier. It's the only example. This is a Photoshop magazine. It's funny, no? Because I really believe if you can not use Photoshop, don't use Photoshop. Again, like the Star of David, the ritual of wars. In 2005, there were 6 wars. Now there are 7 wars. Already there will come more. So come only when there is peace, like now, in the summer, please. Another exhibition that I had was in Casale Monferrato near Milan. And this is the olive tree, a symbol of peace that was taken out. It's like us, the Jews that were taken out from Poland, Germany, Austria, France, and they had to escape and come to Israel as refugees. And on the other hand, the Palestinians are also refugees. So it's a tragedy. So both sides suffer from a big tragedy. So the two olives confronting each other, it's not exactly peace. So this is part of the exhibition, like issues that we talked about. Okay, now I'm going to a heavy-duty subject. I don't know, can I continue, or I'm already 40 minutes in my flight? I'm going to talk about the sources of my work, my history. Both my parents were born in southern part of Poland or the border of Germany, in the same street, a house next to each other. And I'm boring them? And they knew each other more than 85 years ago. And 10 years ago, I decided to tell their stories, both my father and my mother. So my father was 13 when, together with his family, he was sent from his hometown, Benjin, to Auschwitz. After being in the war for a couple of years in a ghetto, they were transferred to Auschwitz. On the ramp, yes, he was selected by medical doctors, Nazi medical doctors, for medical experiments. The rest of his family was sent to the gas right away, together with 3,000 other Jews in this transport. So he was taken from Birkenau on the ramp to Auschwitz I. So I started to follow his story also when I was 35. Before that, I think I didn't have the ability to deal with this horrible story. It's a horrible story. It will affect us in our next generation and maybe 2,000 years. Like, we still remember the destruction of the temple by the Romans. I believe that this Holocaust is part of our inheritance. So I started 20 years ago. I had an opportunity to show the first work not by coincidence, in Hamburg, in Germany. So I took a close-up of the number of my father, the tattooed number of my father, 125422, that was made by the Nazis when he was 13. But this was one work, 6 meters long, to commemorate 50 years for the liberation. It took me another 10 years to be able to hear the story of my father. So I was following my father during the years, documenting him without knowing the story, till I was ready. And when I was ready, he told me the story, and I made a whole exhibition with the story, his voyage from Auschwitz to the Nazi headquarters, concentration camp, in Sachsenhausen, Berlin. So 10 years ago, I went to Hotel Berlin in Berlin. It's all symbolic. I took his pyjama, a prisoner pyjama of a 13 years old boy, and hanged it in a cupboard in Hotel Berlin in Berlin, and opened the cupboard and checked the skeletons, the story of my father. And he starts to tell me the story, how in August 23rd he got his tattoo, and I can talk about it for hours, but basically what I did, I took the role of my father and became a prisoner in Auschwitz in the 27th of January, the day of the liberation of Auschwitz in 1945. So 10 years ago, 60 years for the liberation, I took the pyjama and became a prisoner in Auschwitz. And it was a body art. I came to the camp, asked for documents, got the documents to enter the camp with the pyjama, shaved my hair, a whole ceremony, and then I took photos of myself. It's all me here. This is Photoshop, but basically it was done there, and made scenes from the camp. So in this barrack, here in this room, the Nazis made medical experiments on my father's body, on his liver, stomach, zondas, all kinds of terrible stories that he survived, checking hepatitis and other maladies. And these are scenes from the fence. And all this was done originally in January 27, 10 years ago, minus 23 degrees with a pyjama. I felt maybe a little bit the closest I could for the story of my father by maybe pain. So I became from my history a master in pain, and of course I got pneumonia after that. But I couldn't believe how could they survive. So I called my father and asked him, how did they survive? So he said, they didn't. So then I moved to Sachsenhausen, where they continue the medical experiments and scenes from the camp on the Block 2 in the Krankenbau on the left. And the story is going to the next generation, to my son that now is in the army. And all this on the wall of the concentration camp. And there was a catalog with the number of my father, and in front of 7,000 people that came to the exhibition, to the opening in Sachsenhausen. And Joschka Fischer, I guess you remember him, he was the foreign minister, and he signs the catalog. It's symbolic. So I come to my father back to Jerusalem, where he lives, and I show him this signature. He said, I don't need it, I have already a signature. So this is in 1938, the only photo I have of my family. And this is my father. The rest are gone. So this is why I guess I had to make 4 children. I had to. It's something that was stronger than me. So I made a regeneration. It's in Polish, regeneracja. So 70 years later, this is my family. So only my father is a mirror then and now. It's not now, it's 2008. Another project that I followed my mother's story before the Holocaust, because my mother had also an amazing story. She was in camps, escaped from a camp, and was hiding in a German village in the Sudetengau and survived the war. Because she had blue eyes and blonde hair, and she looked totally Polish. Nobody suspected she came from an ultra-Orthodox family with 10 brothers and sisters. So Serce Moje was a survey I made. You know what the meaning of Serce Moje? It's in Polish, my heart. This is how my mother used to call my grandmother used to call my mother, and my mother used to call my daughter since she was born, my heart. And this is the name of the project, commemorating the six sisters, again, the number 6 sisters of my mother, my aunts. So this is the town, Będzin, in the southern part of Poland, that was built 650 years ago by the Poles, by the king, Kazimierz the Great, that built a castle and brought the Jewish families to make trade in this area. So 600 years later, before the war, there were 50,000 Jewish people in this city. And this is the big synagogue. You see, you cannot see even the church, because the synagogue was the most impressive building in the city. When the Nazis entered in September 1939, they entered the city that was on the border. They burned the whole street and the synagogue with the people inside. So my mother told me this story. So I bear this, but the project is something that was before the war, the memories before the war. So when my mother was 80, I was ready to go with her to Poland, back home. And the project was not about the Holocaust. The project was about the memories from her gone family, from her no survivors family. So this case, my daughter took the role of my mother 70 years later, and this is the house where my mother was born, and my daughter is playing the violin on the roof, as you know, fiddler on the roof. You know, it's a mythological story. There was a movie about it. I don't know it's a Jewish theme. Like my mother that used to play with her 6 sisters, and my daughter, I hope she broke her arm, left arm. I hope she will be able to continue to play the violin. She's 15 now. So this is the poster for the exhibition that was in the National Museum in Poznań in Poland in 2008. So I don't have time to tell the story of my mother, how she escaped and survived, but basically the story is to tell, this is my mother that died more than 2 years ago. And we came to Poland and my mother disappeared in the Polish crowd. She's Polish, totally. And her language was perfect Polish. So I thought about it. Because she was born Jewish, she was doomed to die. And this is against, history that she survived. So we went to the house where my mother was born, and this is suddenly this heart, my heart, is on the wall that turning to the east toward Jerusalem. So the story, like the story with my father, me taking the role of my father here, my daughter is taking the role of my mother 70 years ago. So my mother is going with my daughter to an ultra-Orthodox Jewish shop and buys her a dress exactly like she used to wear, a very traditional dress, and make a tzöpfchen like she used to have. And together, the grandmother and the granddaughter are going to find out about the family. So we locate the house in Modrzejowska Street, number 42 in Benjin. And just for a second, the memory is vivid by Photoshop. And the 6 sisters are again together. My mother is my daughter is my mother, and her 6 sisters in front of the street. And then together I take my mother and my daughter to the backyard of the house. And my mother is suddenly telling the stories of the life, the Jewish life, that are no more gone, but lively and happy lives they had 70 years ago with a big, warm family and Jewish traditional, like you have here. You know, tradition is important. So my mother, with her fantastic memory, remembers every family name here in the house, and she's telling, here we used to play hide and seek, here we used to play class or run in the stairs and to hide. And we enter the flat. I had to go 3 times to Poland from Tel Aviv in order to convince the people that are living there that I want nothing from them. I want to document the history in the real location. So eventually I brought the mayor of Benjin to help me to convince the people that I document an art project. So inside the house, we had a chance to talk about the life of my mother and her family. And between the houses in the backyards, this is Modrzejowska 44, where my mother met for the first time my father. During the war, they worked together in the same hard labor, forced labor camp, and then my father was taken to Auschwitz, my mother to another camp, and they met 10 years later in Tel Aviv through relatives and neighbors. So my mother told me that one day she heard a knock on the door, and there was this guy with flowers in his hand, and he said, "I'm Beniek, I'm your neighbor," and after an hour he offered to marry her. She said, wait. But she accepted it. And almost, they were together 60 years almost. And here in the staircase were lively and happy, humorous, warm Jewish family. They tried to hide here during the war, but they were all taken. And the marketplace, the Jewish marketplace, and in the castle, and in the aqueduct, suddenly my daughter find stone, heart of stone. And we bring it back to my mother's house in Jerusalem as a souvenir. And here, symbolically, we make the Last Supper of a farewell from the 6 sisters. That I have not even one photo from the sisters. All I have is names. So I take the heart, and according to the Jewish tradition, when somebody dies, you put a stone on the grave. So it's a Jewish tradition to put a stone on the grave. So I put 6 stones, and this is my mother's will in memory of Chaya, Yentl, Sarah, Fela, Rachel, and Pearl Garfinkel, and now my mother Batya, that are gone, but the memory will continue, at least with me, and at least with my daughter. So this is my mother's will that I made before she died, and the story is going to the next generation and the next generation. And all this is in the streets of Poznan in East Poland, and a whole exhibition in the museum with other works of mine. And this is finally, I will stop here. Thank you. Okay. Questions?
Yes. Any questions to Yossi Lemel?
No, they're too tired. I'm hungry.
We'll make it short.
I would like you to reflect loudly, if possible, on 2 issues. The first one, because it seems that sense of humor is very important for you, and I would like you to share very kindly something about that. The role that it plays for you, both as a creator, as a citizen in a country as Israel. And the second question, if you have time only, is just to reflect loudly or to share your thoughts about, it seems that countries as Israel, sometimes if you have a kind of independent voice, you may have, some problems, right? Especially if you are saying things that are not shared by majority or your community or your side or the other side. So I would like you to reflect as well, both as a creator, as a citizen, on that second issue, if possible. Thank you.
Okay, what was the question? No. It's very important. It's a very, because I think, in a way, it's referring to the fact that I'm between a clown and a prophet. Both characters have the right to say non-conventional things. A clown is doing it by humor. Through humor, you can say things that usually are not acceptable. And people tend to forgive you. And as a prophet, you're crazy. I'm a crazy artist, so people forgive me. So this is, in a way, a juggling between the clown and the prophet. Through humor, like the Tirolers in Lustig, also, so I believe that it's, you can enter the hearts of people easier, more easier through humor. Humor has a charm. Humor breaks walls. And humor is something international. It's between humor is human. And people can relate to humor everywhere, in China or in Brazil or in Russia, even in Russia. And the second question? Israel is a democracy, first of all. You can say what you want. Sometimes people maybe don't like you, but you can at least express your opinion freely. And this is a precious gift, a precious quality of the country that allows you, okay, the worst case scenario, they will not show your work, but you have other means of showing it or talk about it. And now on the web, it's much easier to spread your ideas that sometimes are controversial or problematic. So in this case, I think I'm proud to be part of a democracy that has a lot of problems, but it's a democracy. Not to mention other countries that I talked about. Okay, guys?
Any more questions?
You slept. Come on, no? Just one more. Thank you for
thank you for your inspiring lecture. All the typographers here, the question burns on their lips. For decades now, you use the typeface Gil Sans as your typeface. Why?
Okay, thank you for noticing. Right. I think it's a message. The message is that the message is the most, the king, the Caesar of everything is the message. Okay, like some bright people talked about the message. So, in my opinion, I deal with the message, and I decided to pick up the best font because the Helvetica is too corny, but Gil Sans has the quality to express the idea in a very Swiss way, in a way, clean, and not to interfere with the message. It's only like a tool to convey a message, not a decoration or pleasure of beauty. It has a very certain, it's a servant of the message. Okay, so it's deliberate. Maybe there were 3 or 4 works that were with times, which is not so original, but it's a deliberate decision.
Okay.
Okay?
Some more questions, anyone?
No, that's it.
Okay, then thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
I will do.
I want to thank you again for coming here, and hope to see you soon. Okay.
So do we.